Hey RG Kids, Pastor Chris here in the RG Kids room, and where is everybody? I know, you're at home, right? Well, because you're at home, we're bringing a Bible story to you today. Now, I know you see all kinds of cool stories all the time, so you've probably watched movies. You see movies like Frozen and Zootopia and I don't know, whatever other kind of movies. And those are awesome, and there's some really cool stories in there. But the story I'm going to share with you today is a true story. It actually happened. Yep, I know Frozen isn't a true story, but this one is, and it's out of the book of Joshua. So I'm going to read it for you because it also is connected to what we're sharing today with the adults. This is called Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. It says, after wandering the wilderness for many years, the Israelites who had begun the journey with Moses began to die. Moses himself was very old, and he knew that his days were numbered. He begged God to find a new leader to take care of his people. God chose a good and spirit-filled man named Joshua. Moses gathered his people together one last time. Then he called Joshua and Eleazar the priest to stand before him. Moses laid his hands on Joshua's head. This was the sign that God wanted Joshua to lead the people of Israel. Moses wrote down all the things he wanted his people to know about worship, feasts, and offerings. Then he blessed them. Full of grief, the Israelites watched their old leader walk away. Moses slowly made his way up to the top of Mount Pisgah. From there, he gazed out in all directions over the deserts, the valleys, and the cities. He saw a beautiful land that stretched all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. God then spoke to Moses. All the land as far as you can see will belong to you and your descendants. But you yourself will not cross over to the land that will be the home of your people. Moses died on the mountaintop. Joshua knew the Israelites would never see a leader like Moses again. Moses was the one man who had met God face to face and had done wonderful things for his people. For 30 days, the Israelites were in deep mourning. Then one day the Lord spoke to Joshua. Soon after, Joshua called the Israelites together. Pack up all your things, he said. In 3 days we will cross over the Jordan River and enter the promised land. Joshua ordered the men to arm for war and the women to stay in camp. While the people were gathering their animals and possessions together, Joshua sent 2 spies to slip into the city of Jericho. When the spies were inside the walls of Jericho, they needed a place to stay. They were pleased when a woman named Rahab invited them to spend the night in her house. The people of Jericho were frightened. They knew the Israelites had camped across the Jordan and wanted their lands. The king of Jericho learned about the spies and quickly ordered that the gates of the city be closed and locked. Then he sent messengers to Rahab, demanding she send the spies out of her house. Rahab hid the men under stalks of grain that were drying on her roof. She told the messengers the men had left. I know the Lord has given you this land and that Israelites can conquer Jericho, she told the men as soon as the messengers had gone. The people here are afraid and weak. When you capture the city, please bring no harm to me or my family. Give me a sign of good faith. The spies were so grateful to Rahab, so they told her to hang a crimson cord from her window. That's a dark red cord. This would be a sign for the Israelites to spare her household. Rahab's house stood just inside the walls of the city. She rushed to find a strong rope, and she used the rope to lower the men over the wall. When the spies returned safely to Joshua, they gave him information about Jericho. Joshua felt confident the Israelites could capture the city, so he prepared his people to cross the Jordan River. Joshua ordered 12 priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant ahead of the Israelites. Everyone must stay far behind the Ark, he said. As soon as the feet of the priests touch the water, the river will stop flowing and a path will appear, which you should all follow. Slowly the procession began to move forward. When the priests arrived at the river, they began to wade into the water. Just as God had promised, at once the river stopped flowing and a clear path led the people between the great walls of water. All the Israelites passed safely into the promised land. When they reached the plains of Jericho, 40,000 Israelites prepared for battle. As they marched toward Jericho, they could see the gates and the city bolted shut. "March around the city walls once a day for 6 days. Carry the Ark of the Covenant behind you," God told Joshua. The 7 priests who walked before the ark should hold trumpets made of ram's horns. For 6 days, the Israelites walked around the city walls once a day. On the 7th day, the men circled 6 times. As they walked, the fearful people inside the city only heard the steady tramp, tramp, tramp of footsteps. Then, as the men walked around for the 7th time, trumpet blasts shouted in the air. All the Israelites began shouting, their cries mixed with mighty blasts of the trumpets. With a great roar, the walls of Jericho began to shake and tremble. Then, all at once, the walls came tumbling down. Wow, that's a real story where God gave the people of Israel, He gave His people victory. So I want to ask you guys something. You hear that story, that's a true story, that really happened. Sometimes in our lives, when we're having difficult times, challenging times, like if you're home and you're alone and you miss your friends, or if you are feeling sick and you need help, it feels like you're believing for the Lord, and you're believing, your faith can sometimes hit up against the wall, just like the wall of Jericho. Right? And that can be hard for us. We see that in that hard thing, that challenging thing, that painful thing. We're looking at it and it's challenging us and it's making it hard for us to believe. But God is saying, keep believing, just like the people went around the city 6 times. 6 days they did that. And then the last day, they just kept going around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Finally, their faith was strong. They knew that God was going to help them. And they shouted out loud and they blew the horns. And the walls of a city, huge walls that surrounded a whole city, just came tumbling down. So I just want to tell you that if you're struggling and you have some things where it feels like your faith is coming up against a wall, you can do the same thing. Just keep praying. Just keep seeking the Lord. Keep believing. And you can worship and even shout your way to a victory. So I hope this blesses you today. I hope you enjoy the story. And you feel free to ask your parents to help you look at that story again in the Bible. And you guys can talk some more about it. So love you. So sorry we can't be together. But I hope this blesses you. And look forward to seeing you next time.